I mean, I don't mean to bring this up, but there was an article that I was reading like a while back about men that no longer, the people that no longer want to be in a relationship, and so they have these sex dolls, right? And they're quite content with them. Like they dress them up. They have an entire household full of them. That's somebody that's saying he's decided, look, I've been divorced twice, whatever the situation may be, and I just don't want to deal with a human being. So I'm going to take this non-living being and make it mine. I mean, talk about problems and solution.
Right. You know, I think the mind is a very tricky thing. The mind is a very tricky thing, and the ego is a very tricky thing. It can convince us of all sorts of solutions, you know, of all sorts of like, it gives us the illusion of reality, no matter where we point our attention.
Mm-hmm.
So I could say, oh, yoga is the only path, and you know, you have to do the asana this particular way and stand on your head in this particular way, and
right,
that is the thing that we'll do. But the thing is that like life itself is constant movement, is constant evolution. Anytime that we lock ourselves into a particular belief system, we can be sure that the ego has arisen, you know, and is acting as disillusionment. So, you know, in the example you're giving of this person saying, "Oh, if I just get a sex doll, I don't have to deal with people." It's like this very I guess like it's not even a sex doll that is necessarily a problem, but it's that finite or that permanent idea. Mm-hmm. This idea that like it cannot be any other way. It has to be like
it has to be this way.
That is problem. And it's not that I think that people will either like it's not. I don't think it's so like black and white in that people will either will like find themselves and become more self-aware, or go into deep isolation and individualism. I think sometimes that is the path to the other side. Is like people need to go down a very long tunnel into themselves, sometimes before emerging into a larger awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like, I mean, like that's one very specific example, and people have all sorts of reasons as to why they may or may not want to use a sex doll. You know, it's complex. Like humans are not one-dimensional. So while one person may have this inanimate, you know, thing to connect with because they don't want to talk to humans, somebody else may use one for a totally different reason. And so it's difficult for me to say that that is proof that all of humanity is going in one direction, that we're going deep into individualism. Mm-hmm. I think some of us will, and in that process find that we actually are not happy there. Mm-hmm. We'll get far enough down that road that it will be too uncomfortable to stay there, and there will be no other option but to turn around and come back to the self. But the farther you travel that road, the longer the journey is home.
Absolutely.
The journey is home. So, you know, my advice to people is to turn around now.
Do it as quickly as you can.
And turn the attention back inward here.
Yeah. So now that you mentioned that, and I know that you're very passionate, because you two have experienced this, but I want to throw this explanation to you. So with the sex doll situation, one of the explanation that was given as to why this has become a 20-30 million dollars industry and growing, was that it was going to minimize or somehow either minimize or eliminate sexual violence toward women.
So let's just actually make them real objects, you know. Let's not acknowledge the humanity of
no.
Let's just make objects so that we can masturbate on.
Right, but this was the scientific explanation for why it has become, and it has to be this way. And I was like, This is crazy. Your take on that?
Like I said, I think people will convince themselves of all sorts of things, you know, in order to avoid having to do the work. You know, sitting with like all the discomfort that arises from recognizing how misogyny and how gendered violence operates in the world, like that is not a comfortable thing to sit with. We do all sorts of things to distract, to get away from having to sit with what really comes up when we acknowledge that piece, when we acknowledge the suffering of others, right? So it's easier to say, oh, we just create this object and that will solve the problem. Then I don't have to sit with these like really uncomfortable feelings, and
Right.
we don't have to unpack that. But of course, when we sit and for a long time and we unpack that, is that going to stop people from raping? Is that going to stop people from pedophilia? Is that going to stop sex trafficking from happening? No, that will still happen. And will it solidify ideas around the objectivity of the body, to look at any human body as an object of pleasure rather than like the very complex, you know, structure that it is?
Right.
You know, a body of emotions, of feelings, of experiences, like a whole human
Voices.
is attached to that. A
Yeah.
whole life is attached to that. And so I think if we don't acknowledge and honor that, however that looks, whether it's through sex dolls, whether it's through, you know, billionaires using human bodies as ways to generate income for themselves and not acknowledging, you know, that there are actual people's lives, that people actually suffer,
Right.
then, you know, like I said, the mind will convince itself of all sorts of things. It will justify any behavior for you.
Yeah. It's quite interesting. It's going back to mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I have this question. How can someone, and I think we've already covered this similarly, but I will ask it again just to clarify. How can someone use mindfulness and loving kindness every day